Thanks again for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, Energizing LPs, how to turn your AGM into an opportunity engine. My name is Ray Grant. I'm with Altvia, VP of Partnerships here, and I think we've got a lot of Altvia clients and partners on the line today, but if you're not familiar, Altvia is a tech platform for alternative investment firms, including a suite of products for investor relations, a CRM, a VDR portal, and analytics tools. And I am very excited to be joined by a couple of experts in the space here today. Mary Adams, founder and CEO of Avivant Partners, and Matt Curtolo, founder and LPGP advisor at MC Advisory. So thank you guys both so much for joining me and being here today. I'll let you take a minute to introduce yourselves and give a little bit more background. Mary, if you want to kick off.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us, Ray. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Avivant Partners is a boutique firm that designs and delivers strategic meeting planning and association management services, mostly and primarily for the financial services industry. So helping investment managers, hedge funds, private equity firms deliver the experience that you want your LP base to experience.
Great. Matt?
Great. Well, again, thanks, Ray and the Altvia team for having me. My name is Matt Curtolo. After about 20 plus years as a sitting LP, investing across large institutions such as Hamilton Lane and MetLife, serving on many advisory committees and attending a lot of AGMs, I formed my own advisory firm a little over a year ago, where I work both with GPs, primarily on the emerging side, on strategy and areas to improve their messaging and LP engagement, as well as working with LPs on portfolio design, construction, asset management, and the like.
Awesome. Yeah, so really exciting to have great perspective from you guys, both from the GP and LP perspective, in terms of how to make AGMs impactful, meaningful touch point for your firm. And I skipped over this, but obviously today's session will be recorded. We've got a Q&A chat here as well, so feel free to make this interactive. Drop any questions you have in the chat and we'll address those, or follow up individually. And yeah, we'll follow up with the checklist and recording after the call. So sort of setting the stage for the conversation, a few stats here that I think most of you are all too familiar with. But overall fundraising in 2025 is challenging. Overall capital raise is down 24% from the 2021 peak. Average fundraising cycle is stretched out to 19 months. Exits are down. LPs are clamoring for liquidity. And as a result, from our own surveys, we found about a third of GPs are citing fundraising and capital flows as their biggest challenges in 2025. And so the AGM and your investor meetings are a part of your fundraising capital raising strategy, a part of a way that you can differentiate in this competitive fundraising environment. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and how we can make that a differentiating touch point for you. So in terms of discussion points that we'll go through today, why AGMs matter, what we're thinking of AGMs, how it fits in strategically to your overall investor relations strategy, LP expectations, what do LPs want out of this, and how can you make that an engaging, good experience for them. And then from an execution standpoint, what are some common pitfalls that we see, common mistakes, and then how can we execute well day of there, and other sort of quick wins. And yeah, we'll see where the conversation takes us. And yeah, feel free to drop in any QA. Okay, so just kicking it to you, I guess, Mary, to start. Why do AGMs matter so much for GPs in 2025.
I might just retort, why don't they matter, Ray? They are the pinnacle of your client engagement. You have the scarcest resource is time, right, for your LP base, and you've got them there. You have their attention. It's the best opportunity you have to showcase your brand, your team, your portfolio, you know, to the people that matter most, your LPs, right? So I know we have a limited amount of time here, but cannot stress enough the opportunity that you have in front of you not to squander it and to plan and execute properly. If they're done well, they build trust, they build on those relationships that you have or start new ones. And then they create that momentum with your LP base for commitments to come. And so as we just saw from the stats, that could take a long time. So starting now is advisable.
Great. And yeah, Matt, what's your take? And maybe from an LP perspective as well, why are these AGMs so important?
Yeah, I think Mary just alluded to it, but it is the opportunity for a GP to hopefully see most of their LPs in one place. And there are very few of those opportunities. So I think the AGM itself, when I think about it as having been a sitting LP, I alluded to it before, I've managed over 700 GP relationships. I mean, you're going to a lot of these. So thinking about the highest value, the highest impact, as LPs go into these annual meetings thinking about what can they gain from attending these. One, you want the opportunity to spend time with the GP's full team. So think about the converse of what I just mentioned. A GP hopefully gets most of their LP base in the room. As an LP, I get the opportunity to interface with a lot more folks on the GP's team that I may normally not have a chance to interact with. So it's an opportunity to, I'll say, assess and reassess the firms where we've made a capital commitment, where we're an investor. So it gives us a lot more coverage. So what I think about attending an AGM, I'm going to go to a lot in a given year. I mean, we could all talk about the annual meeting seasons in the spring and the fall, and then weeks within those seasons where you don't know which city you're going to be in next. You're kind of bouncing from meeting to meeting. You want to make these as high value as possible. So I think from an LP, when I attend, I want this to really offer clear value, right? I want to go there and have a presentation where I can meet more members of the team, where I can see more of the portfolio, or I can get a better understanding of things that I have. There's also this concept of time. Mary alluded to it. We don't have a lot of time to do this. I mentioned the bouncing around from place to place, and coverage is tough. So I think the reality is, when you have folks making the decision of when am I going to attend or not, you want to be really efficient with that use of time. So that's one of the other things that I think about. Is this a quick trip? Is it a longer trip? Is the value kind of measuring my own potential ROI as I'm attending? And then the concept of authenticity. It's a word we'll probably use more today, but the authenticity of both, my interactions with the GP members, but also getting to understand more about how the firm operates, what the firm does at that core layer. So I'm really engaging on a number of levels. I'm thinking about it from a time management perspective, from an engagement, from a value proposition. And that really, it is a critical component of our overall, assessment and reassessment of our GP relationships.
I think we'll actually get to some of those misses and some of the pitfalls that align with what you just said was important. I think we'll get to that a little later in the discussion too.
Great. Thanks, Matt. And yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen. I didn't realize we had a bunch of animations flashing up there. Yeah, thank you guys. So I guess before we move on to the next subject there, I know, Matt, you mentioned the authenticity. Have you seen AGMs change much over the last 5 to 10 years, or, the importance of them or how they're executed?
I mean, most definitely the evolution over the last handful of years, particularly with the pandemic being a moment in time for folks. If I think about, early in my career, a lot of larger scale events, multiple days, both social and content, I think that was the drumbeat consistent through the global financial crisis, right? Till the 08, 09, 10, 11 timeframe, when I think you saw that get transformed to a little bit of a smaller size and footprint, really focusing on the needs rather than a larger social gathering. And then over time, probably over the next 5 to 7 years, you saw a gradual, rebirth of some of those events where folks felt a little more comfortable traveling, the markets were doing better. So you had all of those things that kind of the knobs that you could pull that were increasing the social engagement, maybe the time, maybe whatever it might be. And then when the pandemic hit, I mean, we were functionally unable to go and attend these meetings. I remember when the world shut down, when I think about that first week of March in 2020, my team at MetLife, we were all scheduled to be on the road, going to different annual meetings. And I'm sure Mary can speak to it, but folks had to think on the fly of what do we do now? We have all these folks who are coming into town. That converted into the onset of virtual annual meetings, which I think from an LP where, alluding to it before, having to travel to a bunch of places to have that, to get the value that I was looking for, I was able to do some of that virtually. Now, it wasn't a replication of what was happening, but that ushered in a new era, I think, where virtual interactions, virtual annual meetings, at least for a couple of years, became the norm. And now I think where we are today is we have that mix of, there's some content that's delivered best virtually. There are some meetings that you have maybe in a virtual context. The in-person meetings maybe take a little bit more shape where you are amplifying and focused in on the in-person interactions. But yeah, I think if you look over the last 2 decades, we've seen a lot of different shapes and sizes. I wouldn't say there's been a ton of innovation in the space, but certainly when push came to shove and we as an industry had to realize how we were going to keep these really important events intact, we pivoted to the virtual event. And I think that's become still an important part of our, an important arrow in the quiver, so to speak.
I would argue that the hybrid model is not necessarily the most effective, but virtual, yes. We are asked continuously, which content should be digital, which should be in person, and can we do hybrid for those who can't attend? We highly discourage that model because someone always suffers. The people in the room are sort of waiting for the technology to catch up, or the people on the other end of the screen are often distracted by things at work, or the technology doesn't work on their end. Uh, Technology is much more forgiving if it goes down in front of you. They can see the human element of people actually working on it and trying to fix it rather than these people didn't organize this well, the technology doesn't work, etc. So I feel like, kind of going to the quality and the high value piece, treat the people in the room as though they are in front of you. They are the people that you're paying attention to, and they are your focus. I've
Right.
not seen much innovation either. We do get the question also about when to have these. Should we have it outside of, AGM season? And, we just ran a very large AGM in New York City a couple of weeks ago. And I recognized one of the investors just that I'd known from my 20 plus years in the industry. And he said, "It's great to see you. I'm stopping by this one to get the information I need, and then I'm heading to another one." So it actually becomes a convenience factor rather than, oh, I have, 5 in a week. It makes it very easy and facilitates the learning and also the breadth of the ability to attend a lot.
Right.
Yeah, maybe Ray, if you don't mind, I'll
Yeah.
I'll piggyback on top of that too, because I think from the LP perspective, team size and size of portfolio also will indicate how many
Right.
of these you can attend, what you can attend, how long you can stay. We talk about those as if they're logistical, but it really is much more about that value proposition, to
It's
Mary's
also
point.
strategic, right? Who's
Yeah.
going where, when. So, yeah.
Who do we have coverage of? Who do we need to see? Who might be fundraising this next year? Where has there been a change? Who's on our watch list? So there's a lot of things that will drive LPs to decide what to attend outside of when and where and length of time. But all of that goes into the calculus of having the most successful high impact event.
Yeah, and I think that's a good transition into a question that just got dropped into the Q&A here. What are your thoughts on opening the AGM to local industry ecosystem, inviting other GPs, non-Portco founders, or industry folks? does that help elevate your brand and network, or is it not worth it? And does it dilute the one-on-one time with LPs?
I was going to use the D word, so I think it dilutes it and distracts. So we'll
Yeah.
go with double there. But I also think that detracts from the ability for LPs to network with one another, because now you've got more of, since we're calling it an ecosystem, the GP to LP ratio in the room. So I think that kind of skews that as well and dilutes it. I think it dilutes. Matt, I'm really curious what your thoughts are too.
I think there's a fine line. I know as a prospective LP, there's no better way to do diligence on a GP, even if you're doing the traditional on-site diligence where I'm in their office and meeting with people. There's really no other way to get a perspective of how the firm behaves and operates in totality than at an AGM, right? You get to see how they talk to people, who sits where, like all the nuanced things. I always joke that's kind of like a poker table, right? You're not necessarily just playing the cards, you're watching how everybody's interacting. So as a prospective LP, I think it's good for the GP to invite those folks. They also get the opportunity to do in-person references effectively, right? If a GP produces a reference list, that's great. But if you're in the room and you see some faces that you know or don't, or institutions that look similar, it can be a very high-powered tool, but I wouldn't open it up broadly, because I agree with you, Mary. Once you get a number of folks who maybe have less vested interest, remember the GP-LP relationship is a partnership. Everybody else in that room that's not tied into that partnership may have other motivations. And the worst case scenario, it's maybe obvious, but if other GPs are in that room, there's some trade secrets and confidentiality that you may have to worry about and consider if it was just a room of folks who are partners with you.
Right. And then the conversation becomes more guarded.
Very much, yeah. And then I guess we could talk about this too, of is it a sales, is it an event to continue to promote yourself? How honest and candid do you want to be? There's different tones that meetings can set. And I think as you get mixed constituents, you might have to change that tone.
Yeah, I have heard of some examples of sort of educational sessions during an AGM, maybe more for a GP that's in a bit of a unique asset class or something along those lines. But it does sound like it's a balance between unique content and not diluting, the primary goal there. And so I guess transitioning into the next talking point, what do LPs want? What are LPs hoping to get? I know you touched on some of this already, Matt, with, getting some clarity around strategy and things like that. But in terms of content, the day of experience, what are LPs looking for?
Yeah, I think there are a few words, right? I said authenticity before, right? I want to see the GP in their quote unquote natural habitat, which the AGM is no one's natural habitat. Maybe Mary, it's yours to some degree, but I think you want to have as much authentic one-to-one connection as you can in that scenario. I don't want to be bogged down with a lot of minutia, right? I don't want you to drain the page, like throw a bunch of slides on the page, talk to me about a bunch of numbers.
Right.
What I really want is clarity. I want to get to re-engage. I want to know what's happening. I want to feel close to this manager, where when I walk away, I end up with, okay, now I'm up to speed. I understand who they are, what they're doing, where they're going, and how things are kind of sitting. Again, this is a big component of if I'm an existing investor, at some point my re-up decision will come along, right? I have to re-underwrite this manager. So this is a great input to that process. I would say, in addition to the pure content components of this, having the space to interact with both GPT members and other LPs is probably higher on the list than the content itself. That may be a personal preference, but I think for the most part, making sure there's breaks, making sure there's an opportunity for folks to get together and, just catch up. I alluded to it before, but post pandemic, when we all started going back in person again, I felt personally a lot of pent up energy where I'd done calls and Zooms with folks, but to be able to see my peers in person again was great. So making sure there's enough space for folks to interact, and I'd say in a lighter way, right? Not a 15-minute coffee break, but allow some space for folks to be able to, get together, share notes. We're a lot of us are friends and peers who've known each other for a long time. So it's a good opportunity on that front.
So I've seen, to your point about the lighter interaction, I've seen this done in different ways. We've done, sort of assigned seating, making sure that it's a curated table for a meal, for example, so that you're obviously seated next to someone from the GP side, but also relevant LPs that might be of interest to you in your, world. Or something to the whole 180 flip there to making it very casual, doing food stations, making it more of a really relaxed feeling. And you can do that in an elevated way, but it's very different. So it all goes back to authenticity, which you're going to hear in every single section here. You have to be you. You have to really pay homage to what your brand is, what you're trying to convey, where you are in the fundraising cycle, and how that parlays into the experience on site. It's one of those moments where you have the most captive audience right in front of you. So make sure that the impact is high for the right reasons. Oftentimes when we work for clients, we'll sit down immediately. So our process is to sit down and talk to key stakeholders and understand the key performance metrics, right? The indicators. What does an AGM success look like? So most of the time, the client starts off by telling us what all the C-suite would like, what everybody internal, what their metrics are. And, for lack of better term, I'm going to state Captain Obvious that they forget the LP. So listening to what Matt has to say, listening to what your base has to say seems like a no-brainer, but is often overlooked. So I think that's something that's needs to stick with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To Mary, I would say it's a great point. You never want to feel like you're, just a passenger in the ride, because it's an LP, right? This is again, not to push too hard on it, but the annual meeting is often a fund expense. So as an LP, I'm actually paying for this event, right? This is part of this. So
Yeah.
I want a high value event, and to your point, Mary, making sure it's memorable. It's something that people come away with feeling positively, because I am going to attend 20, 30, 40 in a year. So
Right.
yeah, a lot of the content can blend, right? I am going to likely be able to go back to the presentation and look at the materials around companies and things like that. But if you have a really compelling presentation, to your point before, right, you're doing something different. I can learn something. I can take away a conversation from an industry expert, or you have a great panel, or I get to meet some of your portfolio company CEOs and really feel what your companies are doing and how your strategy is living. Those interactions are going to stay with me and make the event more memorable.
Yeah. And a comment question in the chat here. They said, Matt, you made a good point about the confidentiality, trade secrets of existing partners being at the AGM, but that having prospective LPs is critical. So how do you balance sessions that can be open to all versus more closed doors or only existing LP sessions?
Mary, I'd be curious how you've seen or done that in the past.
Yeah, it is always a balance. And it's a terrific opportunity for prospects. So, just balancing the content in terms of being transparent, sending the really sensitive data ahead of time and password protected, microsites and things like that are a way around that. But making sure that the content you're delivering isn't so light that it's not compelling, right? So on site. I think they're, delicate balance, but have to be transparent. And I think prospects will, appreciate that also, but to a point where you're not sharing something that's gone too far.
Yeah, where I've seen it be really successful is sort of a large room with a divider in between. This is not my bailiwick. I don't know actually the logistics or how any of that stuff works, but you have a big room that's split into two with your existing LPs where you can do a portfolio review, deep dive, talk about the metrics. You can do some more strategy sessions, higher level sessions with the perspectives, or in a lot of cases, the CEOs might be in there. So you can have a mixed group where the prospects aren't getting access to that information that you may or may not want to share. And then you take the divider down after that's done, and everybody gets to mingle and hear from hear the success stories about portfolio companies, the future, sort of the stuff that's going to be important and interesting to everyone. Because I don't think it's just the content, it's the ability to mix and mingle. So certainly you'd
Yeah.
want those folks to sit together at the meals, and you'd want them to have opportunities to share ideas with each other. But
Yeah.
true divided content sessions, I think, is the best way to achieve it.
So breakout sessions are a great way to do that. And even having the prospects come early to get, you also have different levels of sophistication of knowledge, right? So you sometimes you can't be all things to all people in sort of your general plenary type session. So you'll want to have breakouts or even a precursor meeting that allows you to maybe explain fundamentals, be transparent. It depends on which way it goes, but the breakouts can be a great way to do that. Very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a good transition into another question we have here. Thank you for sending those in. Maybe a little bit more tactically, what's the ideal duration of an event for from an LP perspective, and along those lines, that sort of ideal format as well?
Happy to
My
go first.
answer is always that it's the GP. The GP knows the answer to that. No one else knows the answer to that, right? So you have to assess how much content that you have, how many strategies you have. Again, we'll go back to that level of sophistication of knowledge. If you're speaking at a certain level and you're losing half the LP base, then you need to take some time and do things and structure the meeting a little bit differently. And Matt and I have just gone back and forth and talked about the interaction. There is no replacement for human interaction here, and we can't lose that either. So creating moments throughout are important, but going back to the high level, high impact content that you're delivering, that's really up to you on how you, the GP, on how much content has to be delivered and how much is nice to have and what's too much.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking about it more from a ease of access, right? How easy is it for me to get to this location? Where are your LPs coming from?
Mhm.
If I have a European LP base and I'm doing an event in San Francisco, I need to be cognizant of the amount of time it's going to take folks to be there in person versus let's find a location that works for most of our LPs, or you do multiple events. So I think it comes down to understanding what you want to achieve, right? If you do have a diverse LP base, if you do have a lot of funds, can you break it up in a way to make me as an LP feel like it's a good use of my time, right? And in a lot of cases, this is very specific, but if I have to fly in for a dinner and then stay through the next day to catch a late flight home, more than likely my head's not going to be in that meeting the whole time. I'm going to likely be thinking about let me check into my flight, let me make sure everything's on time. So it feels specific, but making sure that you give folks the amount of time that they need to be fully present and not just worry about getting in and out, things that are beyond your control. But as you're planning it, knowing where people are coming from, finding the right location, leaving enough room, as Mary said, for social interaction, but not making it too cumbersome where I have to make the decision of, can I spend 3 days inclusive of travel to go
Right.
to what's going to amount to maybe a day and a half of real content?
Especially if you're only interested in one or two funds, and just to take everyone's time talking about all of them at one time is really kind of a waste. So we have to be very thoughtful about how and who to whom and for how long we're delivering this content. That said, there's also a flip side, for prospects or people that might be interested in another fund that aren't currently invested there. It might be an interesting way to share content more broadly too. But it's the same question arises, how long, when to do it, um, and the format always comes back to what you said, Matt. What is the end goal? What are you trying to get out of it? And look at it from your perspective as well as your LP base. Consider all the aspects.
Yeah, and you touched on, I think, another question in the chat here, Mary, about uh, managing multiple funds. When do you stop reporting on the early funds, and how do you divide LPs based on their portcos or funds of interest?
don't be afraid to ask them. You know,
Yeah.
that's really, that's also another touch point, a reason to reach out, a reason for a conversation. So sometimes that's a nice relationship building tool as well.
Mhm. Yeah. If you're investing your sixth or seventh fund and you have one asset in your first or second fund, I don't think it warrants airtime during the main AGM session. I think that's something where you seek out the LPs who are in that fund, or you have a separate call to cover that sort of stuff. Right? I don't think it doesn't have to be all inclusive of the entire history of a firm. The GP, you have the discretion of what do you want to cover, what's the highest impact, what's the highest value. And I want to double click on what Mary said, because the pre and the post engagement of like what getting an email from a GP saying what topics are most interesting to you as I'm registering for the event 3 months prior. That's fantastic input that you can put into developing your show, your presentation. And then after the fact, getting, within a week, within 2 weeks, while it's still fresh in people's mind, what did you think of this? So to constantly evolving, making sure you're reaching the people in the way that you want to, and not being tied to one strict regimen of this is the way we do it. You're here to really get a lot of engagement from LPs. So whatever, taking that as kind of your first bit of feedback and input is super important.
Yeah, there's no right formula, right? So when clients come to us for the strategic part, we don't have a formula. We don't have a process that says this is what you have to do, check all of these boxes. We talk through all of these aspects as well. So it doesn't become cookie cutter, it goes back to the authenticity and helps you reach the end goal as well. I think our next topic is actually pitfalls, and I can't help but latch on to the follow through and the follow up after. So most times we find that GPs are racing to the finish line. They've burned out all their human resources, they've spent their entire budget plus some, and then they come to us and they say, how could we do this better? And better is not getting to the finish line, collapsing, and then saying, I don't want to talk about this for another 6 months. And we don't, they don't reach out to their LP base and say, how was it? What feedback do you have for me? Also, just kind of continuing with whatever messaging may have been leading up to the AGM, making sure that's continuing afterward, and keeping that CRM really loaded with great content. It's a terrific opportunity. And we talked about, this being a really great opportunity to build momentum. Continue on it. Don't drop the ball right there. It's sort of a waste of energy and resources if you do.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for the CRM plug. About yeah, no, that's great, and I think good timing to transition more into the execution of the event. But yeah, there was one more technical question here about just sharing the presentation materials ahead of time or afterward. Is that a best practice in your mind?
I feel strongly about, if it's a content rich, if it's data rich, send that beforehand. Let me keep that in my files, whether I'm looking at that before or after. That is not great big screen fodder for an in-person
Right.
annual meeting in a big ballroom where everybody's trying to scroll down notes. Accessibility to that information beforehand is good, because then you'll have folks, you don't want it to be an assigned pre-read, but you want folks to have it if they want to consume it. One of my practices was always, if I got it beforehand, I'd read it on the flight to the AGM or the train ride to the AGM, so I'd kind of be in the right headspace. So you give folks an opportunity to do that, and if not, they have it available to them in their books, in their records, in the file. So I think making it accessible. What I have liked too is some short form videos beforehand that cover some of that, some areas that maybe won't get covered in the meeting itself. So you get, again, a little bit of a primer before you get there on, here are some things we're not going to talk about, but if they're important to you, you can consume them here.
Yeah, and another one of those common pitfalls that we've already touched on being not allowing enough space for LPs to be mingling and networking. A question in the Q&A here is asking about a dinner or evening reception before the meeting, or is a reception after the meeting better in your mind?
Mary,
Or
what have you seen?
I see both. I do like it ahead of time, but also be cognizant again of where they're coming from, where the LPs are traveling in from. It's a nice primer. It gets people to either reconnect or meet someone new. And so the next day you have a little bit of connectivity that you're going into the meeting with.
Yeah.
Having the reception right after, oftentimes you'll see people heading for flights, dropping off. You'll see some of the momentum lost there. It's not a hard and fast rule, but I prefer the night before if it's possible and if it kind of flows with the meeting.
But my responses have both, right? Because you're going to be able to accommodate different people. I mean, I know that it increases a little bit of complexity potentially, but for people who can attend the night before, you have an early start the next day. There are people who may not be able to make that evening reception, but having something maybe a little less formal after the event, I think you get people at different stages, right? There's a lot of energy potentially before, and then afterwards you can solicit that real-time feedback from the LPs that are still
Mhm.
there. Like, what did you think? Right? Just asking that question while you're, sitting down doing something informally. It's not going to work for all LPs, but I think having both of those, especially if it's a one-day event, where night before, day of, and then people are leaving that day. I think that works out to have options night before and night of.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would add that I would like to differentiate the two in some way. So something, entertainment wise, speaker wise, something like that that might be a little bit different for each to capture those two different audiences or
Right.
segments thereof.
Yeah. Or maybe it's a more exclusive group, an advisory board,
Hmm.
or something along those lines that you add on. Um, so yeah, going back to sort of event execution day of, I know we like to talk about swag and what LPs are looking for there. I guess anything else top of mind, Mary, in terms of big red flags or common pitfalls day of execution and what have you been seeing lately with gifts and swag?
Yeah, so one of the biggest pitfalls I see are the internal teams talking to one another. So instead of their LP base, they are very comfortable with their colleagues or they haven't seen, their superior in a while and they want some FaceTime and those types of things. This is not that time. The time is to be used very strategically and thoughtfully to interact with your LP base or your prospects. So I think having roles and responsibilities ahead of time, even to the being very disciplined about who you want to talk to, who you'd like to meet. We often ask, just as your meeting partner, who would like to meet who? We will let you know when they arrive. We'll hand deliver this person to you or say, please wait a moment. We'd like to introduce you to someone that's waiting for you. It offers a next level feeling of relationship building. They were expecting me. I feel very valued here. People know I'm coming. That to me is one of the biggest pitfalls on site is that miss. So just really, thinking that through and executing. Also just, getting close to an event, trying to do too many things, grandiose, adding some curveballs in right at the end. It just makes people frantic. Um, and really think through, is it necessary? Is this really going to add the value that we think it will on site? Adding a big keynote that, you've already met your attendee target numbers. Why do you need the big keynote? This is adding sort of logistics onto a team that might not have the time to prep them, or, it might be something that detracts from the event rather than adds to it. Um,
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
terms of swag, always a question. Obviously, we're going to look at some compliance parameters around that, travel issues. So I had one giveaway that I received that everyone got flagged going through security at the airport. So making sure you're not, handing out a multi-tool with knives going through JFK. Just really thinking through, is it useful? Is it packable? Um, and is it a perception issue, right? So kind of going through all of those key
Mhm.
metrics.
Yeah. If I can jump in, right, I think the talking about the pitfalls, right? I think they're from the LP's seat. I want this to be as seamless as possible, my focus is not around, to Mary's point before, like if the technology fails in person, I'm going to have give a lot more grace in that scenario. I'm not necessarily looking at all the details. I know folks in Mary's seat, my wife is a meeting planner, so I understand the details that go into really getting the run of show, getting everything in order. It's the adage of sort of the duck on the surface looks like it's just floating along, but underwater it's paddling the hell out of it. So I think making sure that you don't let those details derail the most important aspects of the day, which is, delivering great content, delivering a memorable event, interacting and building relationships with your LPs, right? Nothing's going to go perfectly, or not everything is going to go perfectly. I think understanding that things will happen, but making sure those critical pieces are still in place and you don't sort of lose sight of that regardless of what happens. Go with the flow. LPs are generally forgiving as it comes to this, some more than others, but I do think for the most part, you want to keep that North Star of making sure the LP has a memorable experience there. In terms of swag, I think the number of things that I have that are very similar to each other, the number of canvas bags, the number of hats that I received, and the number of very common, entire cabinet full of mugs with GP
Yeti.
logos on it.
Yes.
I think that our business may have kept Yeti afloat for many years, but
Right.
doing something different, right? Doing something that really speaks to your brand and your firm or the types of companies you invest in. It doesn't all have to sort of fit the same mold. I think the more you can have something that is different from others, utility is good, but I think it could be something very, very simple that's just fairly memorable in a sea of 20 or 30 items that I'm going to get, that a GP wants to deliver a memorable experience. We gave you this thing that really matters. I still have things from a decade ago from certain GPs that are the item itself was something that connected directly with the event and the GP. So it matters. It definitely matters.
Yeah, I would say too, we've worked with firms that are in, non-tier one cities that, tie it to your hometown pride in some way, and that becomes more memorable as well. Even actually a New York one that we did for many years, we tied it to the black and white cookie. We had a local bakery bag up a few cookies, and then we'd created a really creative note card that had facts about the black and white cookie. It talked through Seinfeld and all sorts of things that were iconic New York pieces, and that really drew some levity, but also tied to the location and the brand. So couldn't agree more there.
Consumable is also very good, and sweet
Yes.
treat is very good. I can mention GP AGM, and when we came back to our hotels, there were cannolis from Mucks, and in those Boston, that was a great surprise. I didn't have to worry about traveling home with it because it didn't last more than a couple minutes.
Right.
Nope. Yeah, I think a couple others I've heard from LPs at conferences is giving optionality. A creative one I've heard is offering gifts that are more targeted toward their kids or dogs, like Crocs
For charity, choosing a charity that's, if you have an ESG strategy focus or, kind of time to firm.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we're at time. That went fast. So if we didn't get to any questions here, we'll make sure to follow up. And thanks again so much, Matt and Mary, for spending the time, and everybody for joining. I guess before we depart, sort of final key takeaway thoughts, Matt, I'll have.
Yeah, I think we hit on the energy space. Use this as both an update but also a marketing tool. Your LPs today are hopefully your LPs for the future. So give them a memorable experience where they can leave feeling really positive about the brand and the org.
Yeah, I would say simple and well executed trumps any day, complex and, sort of mismanaged in the end, because that experience, as you said, is a lasting milestone for one reason or another.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We'll follow up with the recording for everybody as well as our AGM checklist. and a summary of what we talked about today. But yeah, thanks again, and hope we can do this again sometime soon, Matt and Mary.
Sounds great. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Have a good one.